My name is Liam. I'm 26 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I received my Master of Architecture degree from the University of Oregon. It was meant to be a culmination, a threshold. I had imagined that moment for years, the weight of the academic hood on my shoulders, the scent of old paper and polished wood in the convocation hall, the feeling of a door opening into the rest of my life. I saw it as a day of shared joy, a testament not just to my own sleepless nights spent hunched over drafting tables, but to the family that was supposed to be my foundation. Instead, when the day arrived, it was drenched in a peculiar kind of solitude. The Portland sky, in a rare moment of June generosity, was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Sunlight streamed through the tall arched windows of the hall, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, celebratory sprites. Around me, a symphony of joy erupted. My peers were enveloped in hugs, their faces bright with relief and pride. Cameras flashed, corks popped, and a wave of triumphant laughter rolled through the crowd. I stood near the edge of it all, a quiet island in a sea of celebration, my diploma tucked into a crimson folder. I scanned the faces in the bleachers, searching for the familiar smiles I had carried in my mind's eye for years, a hopeful beacon through the fog of exhaustion. But the seats where they should have been were empty. A hollow ache settled in my chest, a cold counterpoint to the warmth of the day. I checked my phone, a foolish, reflexive gesture. The screen was dark, silent. No missed calls. No celebratory texts. Just a stark reflection of my own tense face. With a deep breath that did little to calm the tremor in my hands, I dialed my mother's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, each tone stretching into an eternity. Finally, she answered, her voice a splash of vibrant, carefree sound against a backdrop of music and distant, rolling waves. "Liam, honey, is everything all right?" Her cheerfulness was so dissonant, so utterly disconnected from my reality, that for a moment I couldn't speak. I stared out at the happy chaos, at a friend being lifted onto her father's shoulders, diploma held high like a trophy. "Yeah, Mom. Everything's fine," I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "Just wondering where you are." There was a slight pause, filled with the clinking of glasses. "Oh, that's right. Your thing was today," she said, her tone as casual as if she'd forgotten to pick up milk from the store. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry, it completely slipped our minds. We're in Napa with your brother. He finally hit 50,000 subscribers. Can you believe it? We wanted to do something truly special to celebrate his milestone." I let the words wash over me. A celebration. For my younger brother, Leo, whose entire career consisted of filming himself trying viral food challenges and reviewing overpriced sneakers. They had missed the culmination of 8 years of my life, the scholarships, the all-night studio sessions, the complex designs I had poured my soul into to celebrate a vanity metric on a social media app. A strange calm descended upon me. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the quiet, chilling clarity of a final realization. A laugh, dry and humorless, escaped my lips. "Wow," I whispered. "Of course you did. Don't be like that, Liam. We'll make it up to you, I promise." "No, you won't," I said, and the calmness in my voice seemed to surprise even me. It was the sound of a cord, stretched taut for years, finally snapping. "But that's okay. Don't bother showing up to my future, either." I ended the call before she could respond. I didn't wait for a callback or a frantic text. I knew one wouldn't come, not right away. They would assume I was being dramatic, that I'd get over it. They always did. That night, back in the quiet sanctuary of my small apartment in the Pearl District, the city lights painting soft patterns on my walls, I pulled a large cardboard box from the back of my closet. I had started assembling its contents months ago, during a long, rain-soaked winter night when the loneliness felt particularly sharp. It was a curated museum of my quiet accomplishments, a collection of ghosts. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were the tangible proofs of a life they had chosen not to see. The original acceptance letter from the U of O's prestigious architecture program, the one I'd called them about, my voice trembling with excitement, only to be told Leo was having a rough week and needed them. There were printouts of emails congratulating me on winning the regional student design competition, on making the dean's list every single semester. There was a small, intricately detailed balsa wood model of their house, our childhood home, that I had spent 100 hours crafting for their 20th anniversary because I was a broke student and my time and talent were all I had to give. I'd found it in their garage last Christmas, gathering dust on a shelf behind a stack of Leo's old hockey equipment, the tiny porch railing broken. Taped to the inside of the lid was a note I had written and rewritten a dozen times. It was simple, devoid of the anger I felt, honed down to the quiet, painful truth. I packed it all with meticulous care, as if I were handling delicate artifacts. The next morning, I took it to the post office and paid for tracked, express shipping. As I handed the heavy box over the counter, I didn't feel angry or vengeful. I just felt light. It was the lightness of letting go of a rope you didn't realize you'd been pulling on your own for your entire life. I received a delivery notification 2 days later. Then, nothing. A profound, unbroken silence that confirmed what I already knew. They hadn't understood. Or worse, they hadn't cared to. Life moved on. I started my fellowship at a small, renowned firm downtown, a position I had fought tooth and nail for. I threw myself into the work, finding solace in the clean lines of a blueprint, the logic of structural engineering, the creative puzzle of turning an empty space into something with meaning and purpose. The ache of my graduation day began to fade into a dull, persistent scar. Then, 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening when the sky was the color of a bruised plum and a soft rain was beginning to fall, there was a knock on my door. I was reheating a bowl of soup, lost in thought about a challenging facade design. I expected a package delivery or perhaps my neighbor asking to borrow sugar. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. It was my father, Thomas. He stood on my doormat, dripping slightly from the rain, holding the cardboard box. He looked different. Not just older, but weathered. As if some essential, load-bearing part of him had finally given way. His shoulders, usually so broad and confident, were slumped. His eyes, when they met mine, were red-rimmed and hollowed out. The box in his hands looked impossibly heavy. We didn't know, he said, his voice a low, gravelly thing, barely more than a whisper. I leaned against the doorframe, my heart a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I didn't have to feign confusion. Didn't know what? He lifted the box a few inches, a gesture of offering of evidence. Why you never said anything? Why you didn't tell us you felt this way? A slow, tired smile touched my lips. I pointed past him, toward the contents of the box. I did tell you, I said softly. You just never learned how to listen. Go on. Read the note. Out loud. My father stood frozen in the doorway for a long moment, the rain misting around him. He clutched the box like a man holding the wreckage of something he hadn't realized he'd broken. His jaw was set, a familiar line of stubborn defense I had seen 1,000 times, usually right before he conceded to one of Leo's whims. I stepped back, holding the door open, letting the quiet of my apartment expand to fill the space between us. It was a silence laden with years of unspoken words, of overlooked triumphs and swallowed disappointments. Eventually, he shuffled inside, his movements hesitant, like a trespasser. He took in my space, the drafting table in the corner littered with sketches, the bookshelf groaning under the weight of books on urban planning and sustainable design, the single framed photo on the wall of the St. John's Bridge at dawn. This was my world, a world he had never once stepped into. He sat at the small oak table where I ate most of my meals alone and placed the box before him as if it were a bomb. With unsteady hands, he lifted the lid. I watched, my arms crossed over my chest, as he began to sift through the contents. He wasn't just looking, he was seeing, for the first time. He unfolded the acceptance letter, his lips moving silently as he read the words, exceptional candidate and generous scholarship. He picked up the printout of the email announcing my win at the student design competition in Seattle. I had highlighted the sentence from the judges, a design of remarkable maturity and vision. I remembered calling him that night, buzzing with pride, only for him to cut me off. That's great, son, really. Listen, can I call you back? Leo just totaled his car, and I've got to go deal with the insurance. He never called back. One by one, he examined the artifacts of my quiet striving. Page after page of my achievements, each one a memory of a hopeful phone call that was met with distraction or a perfunctory, "That's nice, son." Then his hands stilled. He had reached the balsa wood model of their house. He picked it up with a reverence that felt about 10 years too late. He ran a gentle finger over the tiny, handcrafted shingles, his expression crumbling. He finally turned it over and saw the small, broken piece of the porch railing. "I remember this," he murmured, his voice thick. "We thought Leo's friends broke it when they were roughhousing in the garage." "No," I said, my voice flat. "It was already broken when I found it." He placed it down carefully and looked at me, his eyes swimming with a sorrow that was so new, so raw, it almost felt like an intrusion. A part of me, the small boy who had always just wanted his dad to be proud, wanted him to weep, to apologize, to say the words I had longed to hear. But all he said was, "I had no idea you felt so unappreciated." I let out a short, sharp breath that was almost a laugh. "How could you not?" I asked, my voice gaining a harder edge. "Every time Leo posted a video that got a few thousand views, you'd call me to tell me how he was building his brand. You threw him a party when he got a free case of protein powder from a sponsor." "A party?" I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "When I won the state-level award for my thesis project, a project that took me an entire year of 80-hour weeks, your only comment was, 'Well, that's what we expect from you, Liam.' Not 'congratulations.' Not 'we're so proud.' Just 'expectation.' As if my success was a foregone conclusion, a utility, something that simply was, requiring no acknowledgement." He opened his mouth, then closed it, the muscles in his jaw working. "You took him and his girlfriend to Napa to celebrate a subscriber count," I went on, the words flowing now, a torrent held back for too long. "When I defended my thesis in front of a panel of some of the most respected architects in the Pacific Northwest, you were sending me photos of your wine tasting. You always had a reason, and the reason was always Leo." My father finally found his voice. He's always needed more support, Liam. He's not as self-sufficient as you." "No," I corrected him, my voice sharp and clear. "He's not. But he didn't need more support. He needed more attention. And you gave it to him, endlessly. You poured all of your time, your energy, your validation into the son who gave you nothing back, while the son who was building a life, a career, a future, was left to do it entirely on his own. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking you to solve my problems. I was just asking you to show up." The silence that followed was heavy, profound. He looked down at his hands, then reached back into the box. He pulled out the note I had taped to the lid, unfolded the single sheet of paper, and began to read it aloud. His voice was a low, fractured thing, each word an effort. "If you ever wonder why I stopped trying to earn your approval, I hope you look at everything in this box. These aren't trophies. They're invitations. Invitations to see me, to celebrate with me, to be a part of my life. They're all the times I reached for you and found you weren't there. Maybe if you see them all at once, you'll finally understand the weight of your absence." He set the note down on the table, his hand trembling. He looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I held his gaze, letting him sit in the uncomfortable truth of it all. I wanted him to feel it, just a fraction of the dismissal I had felt for years. "We made you feel invisible," he said, the words choked. I shook my head slowly. "No, not invisible. Invisible implies you didn't see me. This was different. This felt like you saw me, and you chose to look away." He flinched as if I'd struck him. He stared at the contents of the box, at the scattered evidence of his neglect, for what felt like a lifetime. Then, without another word, he stood up, pushing his chair back with a quiet scrape against the floor. "Your mother, she should have been there. We both should have. I'm going to tell her that." He started for the door, and I thought that was it. A quiet, unsatisfying end. But he stopped, his hand on the doorknob. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp, cream-colored envelope. It was thick, expensive paper. "This came to the house last week," he said, his voice quiet. "It was addressed to you." We almost threw it out with the junk mail. He held it out to me. My old address, our family home, was crossed out and my current address was scribbled above it. I took the envelope. The return address was from the Hawthorne Institute for Sustainable Design. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out a heavy card. Inside, a short, typewritten message was signed by the director of the institute. Mr. Gallagher, on behalf of the selection committee, it is my immense pleasure to inform you that you have been chosen as this year's recipient of the Hawthorne Fellowship. Your portfolio demonstrated a singular talent and a profound commitment to the future of architecture. We are thrilled to welcome you. My father had moved to stand beside me, and he read the words over my shoulder. His breath hitched. The Hawthorne Fellowship, he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Liam, that's one of the most prestigious fellowships in the country. I just nodded, my eyes fixed on the card. And that's when he asked the question. The one that summed up 2 decades of our relationship in 5 simple, devastating words. Why didn't you tell us? I finally looked up from the card, my gaze meeting his. I held up the envelope, a silent testament to years of my news landing in empty spaces. Because for the first time, I said, my voice steady and clear, I wanted to celebrate a victory without having to beg for an audience. He didn't move for a long time, his hand still resting on the doorknob, a sentinel between the life I had built and the one he had just discovered. The air in the room was thick with unspoken history, with the weight of all the conversations we should have had. His shoulders rose and fell with a deep, shuddering breath, the kind you take before diving into cold, deep water. I know I haven't earned the right to ask you for anything, he said, his voice raspy. He turned to face me fully, his eyes pleading. But is there a way to fix this? Is it too late? The question landed not as a relief, but as a burden. It was the question I had silently asked myself in lonely moments for years, and now, hearing it from him, I found I had no answer. How do you rebuild a foundation that was never properly laid? How do you mend a bond that has frayed from years of neglect, not from a single clean break? I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the large window that overlooked the street. The early evening drizzle had intensified into a steady, whispering rain, blurring the neon signs of the brewery across the way into soft watercolors. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass, a man who looked older than his 26 years, with a familiar tension etched around his eyes. I stopped trying to fix it a long time ago, Dad, I said, my voice quiet, directed at the man in the reflection as much as the one in the room. It felt like I was the only one holding the blueprints. I'd send an invitation, and you'd already have other plans. I'd call with good news, and you'd be too busy to talk. You learn after a while. You learn to stop building bridges to places no one wants to visit. It's the only way to stop feeling the disappointment when they don't show up. He nodded slowly, his face pale under the warm light of my apartment. We always thought you were okay. You were the strong one. You never seemed to need us. That phrase, you didn't need us. It was the story they had told themselves for so long it had become truth. My competence had become their excuse for absence. My independence, their permission to be neglectful. It was a punishment disguised as a compliment. I needed a father, I said, turning to face him. I didn't need a loan. I didn't need you to fight my battles. I just needed a dad. Someone who showed up. Someone who was proud of me when I succeeded and just there for me when I didn't. I needed to feel like I was a priority, not an afterthought. He walked back to the table and sank into the chair again, his gaze falling on the box. He reached in and pulled out a creased brochure from my university's architecture department from the first open house I attended. In the margins, my younger self's handwriting was a messy scrawl of notes and questions. On the back, in a moment of youthful vulnerability, I had written a small, hopeful phrase, I hope this is where I belong. He read it, and his composure finally cracked. A single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. You always belonged, Liam, he whispered. We're the ones who got lost. I don't know how we missed all this. You didn't miss it, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. You overlooked it. The word landed with a quiet finality. He visibly recoiled, the truth of it a palpable hit. For a second, I felt a pang of regret for my bluntness, but then the memory of that phone call on graduation day surfaced again. The music, the laughter, my mother's breezy dismissal of the most important day of my academic life. The image of me standing alone in that sea of happy families solidified my resolve. This wasn't about hurting him. It was about finally being honest. "Your mother," he started, then faltered. "What about her?" I prompted. He shifted uncomfortably. She convinced herself you didn't want us there. She said you've been so distant for the last few years, so focused on your own life. She thought maybe you saw us as a burden." A bitter laugh escaped me. Distant? I became distant after she missed every single important event of the last 5 years for one of Leo's manufactured crises. I stopped calling because every conversation ended with a request for a favor for him or a story about his latest trivial drama. She watered a dying plant and then blamed the plant for not growing. He scrubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of profound weariness. "I don't know, Liam. I think we just got so used to Leo being the squeaky wheel, we forgot to check if the other wheel was even still on the axle. We assumed because you were quiet, you were fine. Do you have any idea what that's like?" I asked, my voice low and intense. "To be punished for your own confidence? To be the responsible one? You don't get praise, you get expectations. You don't get support, you get silence. And the one time you falter, the one time you actually need something, everyone is too shocked to know how to help because you've never needed it before. You become a prisoner of your own strength." He had no answer. His eyes were glassy. The only sounds in the room were the ticking of the clock on the wall and the gentle rhythm of the rain against the window pane, each drop a tiny measure of the time that had been lost between us. He reached into his coat pocket again, but this time he pulled out something else. A faded photograph, its corners soft with age. He slid it across the table. It was me, at maybe 10 years old, standing proudly next to a ridiculously ambitious model of the Fremont Bridge, built out of popsicle sticks and glue for a school project. I had a gap-toothed, triumphant grin on my face. And on either side of me, with their arms wrapped around my small shoulders, were my parents. They were both beaming, their faces glowing with a pride that was simple, pure, and aimed directly at me. "I found this when I was looking for a photo for your mother's birthday," he said softly. "In an old album. I'd forgotten all about it. You worked on that bridge for a month. You were so proud." I stared at the photo. I remembered that day. I remembered the smell of the wood glue, the way my dad helped me measure the angles for the arches, the way my mom made a special dinner to celebrate my first place ribbon. It was a memory from a different lifetime, a time before Leo's needs became the sun around which the entire family orbited. A time when my accomplishments were seen and celebrated. "I want to be that father again," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how, but I want to try. If you'll let me." Before I could process his words, my phone, lying face down on the table, buzzed. I flipped it over. A text from my mother. "Dad told me he was coming. He told me everything. Please, Liam. We need to talk." I looked from the phone screen to my father's hopeful, broken face. He was waiting for an answer, a verdict. Forgiveness? A second chance? A sign that the bridge in the photograph wasn't irreparably broken. I wasn't sure I had one to give. But I knew, with a sudden, weary certainty, that my next words would change the architecture of our family forever. I didn't reply to my mother's text. I let it sit there, a silent, blinking cursor representing a conversation I wasn't ready to have. I turned the phone over again, creating a small, physical boundary against the intrusion. My father's gaze never left my face. He waited with the strained patience of a man who knows he deserves none. "The hardest part of this," I said, my voice quiet, "isn't the missed graduations or the forgotten anniversaries. It's that you raised me to be dependable and self-sufficient, and then you used those very qualities as a reason to withdraw your support. You built me to be strong enough to stand on my own, and then you walked away, assuming I'd be fine. The message I got wasn't, 'We're proud of you,' it was, 'We're excused from you.' You didn't think I'd ever break. You didn't think I'd ever stop trying to get your attention. And the moment I did, it sent you into a panic." My dad's gaze fell to the table. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue. In his silence, I heard a confession. I stood and went to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water with a hand that was surprisingly steady. I needed the simple mechanics of the action, the feeling of the cool glass in my hand. In the reflection on the dark microwave door, I saw my own exhausted eyes. For years, I had been trying to design a life worthy of their praise, when I should have been designing a life that brought me peace. "I didn't come here to make excuses, Liam," he said from the dining table. "I came here because I wanted to show up. For once." I turned, leaning against the counter. "Why no?" I asked, the question sharp. After all this time. What changed? Was it the box? Was it guilt? He hesitated, searching for the right words. "It was the silence," he finally said. "After you hung up on your mother, I thought you were just angry. But then days went by. Then the box arrived. And I read your note. And I realized it wasn't anger. It was an ending. You had written us out of the story. We were no longer a part of your life, and the scariest part was realizing we hadn't been for a very long time." I walked back to the table and sat down. "You weren't written out," I said. "You just never picked up the pen." He nodded once, a slow, solemn acceptance of the fact. "That's fair," he breathed. After a moment, he added, "She wants to see you." I knew who she was. My mother, Eleanor. The woman who taught me how to read, who once made the world feel safe, and who then, slowly but surely, had receded from my life, her emotional energy consumed by the black hole of my brother's endless, self-inflicted dramas. I hadn't had a real conversation with her in over a year, not since she'd called to ask if I could lend Leo money for a new camera lens, not to ask about my thesis, not to wish me a happy birthday, just another transaction on behalf of her favored son. "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "She's never apologized. Not for a single thing. She'll just find a way to make it my fault for being too sensitive or too distant." "I think she wants to," he said, his voice earnest. "I think she's just proud and stubborn and terrified that it's too late." I took a long sip of water. It might be. My phone buzzed again. Another text from her. "Liam, please. I know we failed you. I am so sorry." I read the words. Then I read them again. "We failed you." It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a justification. It was an admission. And deep inside me, something cracked. Not forgiveness, not yet. But a tiny fissure appeared in the wall of ice I had built around my heart. I didn't know what I would do, but I knew I couldn't carry the weight of this estrangement forever. It was a load I was tired of bearing. "I'll come over," I said, the words surprising me as they left my mouth. "Tomorrow." "But Dad," I looked him straight in the eye, "if she starts defending her choices or blaming me for being hurt, I'm walking out. I'm not going to sit there and absorb it anymore. That boundary is firm." "I understand," he said, nodding quickly. "Of course." He stood, gathering the empty box. He carefully tucked the old photograph of the popsicle stick bridge into his coat pocket. He looked like he wanted to offer a hug, but he held back, respecting the space I was drawing. At the door, he turned one last time. "You're a good man, Liam," he said, his voice thick. "I'm sorry we weren't there to see you become one." He left, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me in the quiet of my apartment with the echo of his words and the weight of a decision. The next afternoon, I pulled my car into the driveway of my childhood home. The familiar beige siding, the oak tree I'd fallen out of when I was 8, the crooked mailbox Leo had backed into years ago and was never made to fix, it was all painfully the same. I cut the engine and sat for a long minute, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. This felt more daunting than any thesis defense. When I knocked, my mother answered almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the door. She looked fragile. The vibrant, carefree energy from the phone call was gone, replaced by a brittle weariness. Her eyes were puffy, and her hands twisted nervously at the hem of her sweater. "Liam," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. She stepped aside. The house was unnaturally quiet. The air felt heavy, stagnant with unspoken things. We sat at the dining room table where 1,000 family dinners had taken place. Her eyes searched my face as if trying to decipher a map she'd long since folded and put away. "I am sorry," she said, the words rushing out before I was even fully seated. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix years of what I've done. But I need to say it. I just nodded. It was a start. A shaky breath escaped her. For so long, I told myself a story, she began, her gaze fixed on her own clenched hands. The story was that you were the strong one. You were brilliant, you were capable, you didn't need me. And Leo. Leo was always stumbling. He always needed a hand to hold, a mess to be cleaned up. And I let myself believe that parenting was about fixing the broken things. I was so focused on him, I didn't see that I was breaking something else. Something far more important. It wasn't a mistake, Mom, I said, my voice even. It was a choice. You made choices every day to prioritize his wants over my needs. You chose to go to Napa. You chose not to come to my graduation. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. She didn't deny it. You're right, she whispered. I did. And I was wrong. I was so wrong. For the first time, she just sat with the weight of her own failure, without trying to shift it or explain it away. The silence was agonizing, but necessary. I don't deserve to ask anything of you, she said, wiping her eyes. But I hope that someday, you'll let us try to rebuild. Even just a little. I looked at this woman, the epicenter of my childhood world who had slowly become a stranger. I didn't feel the rage I expected. I just felt a deep, profound sadness for all the years we had lost. I don't know what that looks like yet, I said honestly. But you showing up today like this is something. She managed a watery, grateful smile. Can I get you something? Do you want to stay for dinner? I stood up, shaking my head gently. Not today, I said. But maybe next time. That was 3 months ago. Things are not fixed. There is no storybook ending. But there is a change. My parents are trying in small, tentative ways. They came to the reception my firm hosted for the Hawthorne Fellows. They didn't just say hello, they stayed. They listened as I explained my project. My father asked intelligent questions about the materials I was using. My mother told me she was proud, and her eyes were clear. They call now, not to ask for anything, but just to ask how my week was. They are learning to show up. Leo, predictably, is furious. He called me, accusing me of being melodramatic and trying to punish them for his success. He didn't understand that it had nothing to do with him. It had never really been about him. It was about me and what I deserved. I listened to his tirade for a minute, felt the familiar pull of the old family dynamic, and then I did something new. I said, I'm not having this conversation, Leo, and I hung up. Then I blocked his number. I feel lighter now. Not because my family is magically healed, but because I finally put down the burden of seeking their validation. I stopped architecting my life around their approval. I learned that self-respect isn't something someone else gives you, it's something you build for yourself, brick by painful brick. My real graduation wasn't the day I received my diploma. It was the day I realized my worth wasn't dependent on anyone's applause but my own. And with my head held high, I walked into my future, a future I was finally designing just for me.